YouTube just confessed. The Biden administration forced them to ban creators like Dan Bongino for protected speech that violated no rules whatsoever. Careers destroyed, voices silenced, all for challenging the approved narrative. Sound familiar? It's the comic book industry's playbook on steroids. For over a decade, DC and Marvel have blacklisted creators like Chuck Dixon for daring to be openly conservative, leaving the industry with preachy, soulless comic books. This isn't just censorship, it's a war on ideas. And comics were already walking this very dark path long before YouTube ever caught up. Stick around to see how deeply this betrayal goes, who's pulling the strings, and why customers are the only ones brave enough to fight this ideological purge. But first, I do want to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of today's video in the channel, the 616 Comics, the #1 producer retailer in the entire industry. If you go to the website or their app, there is a code in the video description you can use for 10% off their retailer exclusive variant covers. September 2025, Alphabet's bombshell letter to Congress admits the Biden administration's repeated and sustained outreach pressured YouTube to ban creators over COVID-19 and election integrity content, even when it followed policies. Channels like Dan Bongino's, Doug TenNapel's, and Emerald Robinson's, with millions of subscribers, were vaporized for misinformation that turned out to be the truth, just inconvenient truth. YouTube's now reinstating channels claiming conservative voices have extensive reach and are vital to civic discourse. Translation, they got caught violating their own terms of service and need damage control. This wasn't a glitch. It's a system built to crush dissenting voices. Over 1,000 channels were hit per variety, costing creators years of income. Regular folks like you were never supposed to notice. And this all followed a very simple blueprint that I think we all recognize at this point. They went out there and they go and they start dehumanizing people. They start calling you names like Nazi, racist, homophobe, misogynist. What do they think they can use to label you as something less than human? Even myself. I live in the Philippines. My wife is Asian. My children are half white, half Asian. I've been told I'm a xenophobe. I am the world's worst xenophobe, if in fact that's what I am. I'm also told that I'm a racist, despite being married to somebody from another race. But the facts don't matter. It's all about dehumanizing you, so then they can roll over you. Obviously, one of the biggest examples is what they did to Doug TenNapel, going after him for years upon years, labeling him as every terrible thing you can imagine, just to dehumanize him. And once you dehumanize somebody, then you have unequal rules. It doesn't matter if you follow the terms of service, because the terms of service only apply to the good people, the humans out there. Doug TenNapel, those rules don't apply to him. He's subhuman. Therefore, the First Amendment and YouTube's own terms of service don't apply to him. And therefore, we can go out there and attack him, target him, and silence his voice because he's not preaching the approved message, not only by the Biden administration, but certainly by YouTube themselves. The idea that YouTube was just an innocent victim in all of this is one of the most laughable concepts I've ever heard in my life. They were absolutely complicit because, for the most part, they agreed with what the Biden administration wanted them to do. And if Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or whoever was voted in over Donald Trump, we would still be experiencing this to this day, and they never would have even acknowledged it, because they were in fact aligned with what the Biden administration wanted to do, but now they are certainly not in line with what Donald Trump and his administration want to do, and they're having to come clean about it. At least YouTube's finally confessed to their egregious abuses. But comics wrote the censorship playbook a long time ago. The Wall Street Journal's 2014 piece, How Liberalism Became Kryptonite for Superman, exposed a purge in comics. Conservative creators like Chuck Dixon, DC's iconic Batman writer, and artist Paul Ravoch were blacklisted for their political beliefs, not their work. Dixon faced demands to apologize for saying AIDS storylines didn't suit kids' comics. When he refused, his gigs dried up. In the 70s, comics were a brotherhood beyond politics, they wrote. But by the 90s, editors shunned conservatives, Marvel and DC swapped gritty heroes for preachy reboots, tanking sales while silencing dissenters. This wasn't about better stories, it was about control. Now superhero comics read more like propaganda than actual stories. Comic books didn't lose their soul, they absolutely sold it. Because this wasn't a creative takeover that happened in comic books, it was a political takeover. They realized people specifically went to comic books to learn life lessons about morality. And you can't have morality being a two-way street. It could only be one message, and that had to be the liberal message. Hard left activists were allowed to infiltrate comics deliberately so they could change the message, destroy all the heroes, and use comic books as a platform for their own collective ideology. Quite simply, they saw comic books as a cultural weapon and one that they wanted to wield to erase opposition. Because if you're left of Mao, they hate your politics. They think that you are the villain. That is why so many modern creators are oftentimes just showing normal day-to-day Americans as the bad guys in their very own superhero comic books. More often than not, Superman and Batman are no longer fighting supervillains, they're fighting the political opponents of the writers. They don't see conservative creators or customers as part of the family. They see them solely as the enemy these days. And they do this because they can get away with it. They're allowed to. There are certainly HR departments and rules and regulations within Warner Brothers and Disney that Marvel and DC are basically violating every single day, but they're never actually held to those standards, and they've been allowed to take over comic books. There's no appeals process, and they can just blacklist everybody they deem as the enemy without consequences now. But this all goes way deeper than just blacklisting creators. And we know because someone cracked their secret network. Fans knew it existed, but Penny Parker's 2020 expose proved it. The Comic Book Women Facebook group, 440 plus members strong, coordinates attacks on conservative creators. Insiders like Alex DeCampi admit the Whisper network's real. Gail Simone mocks anyone who calls it out. Heather Ontos threatens those on her bad side. Leaked screenshots reveal their playbook. Target creators like Scott Lobdell, spread rumors, amplify lies via media allies, and open job for loyalists. It's not about talent, it's about power. And even with all this out in the open, they still have the ability to cancel projects from the wrong creators and gut careers without a second thought, ensuring only approved voices survive. While comics continue lecturing rather than inspiring, just collateral damage in their ideological crusade. And the reason this is happening and the reason this has taken hold in comic books is because there are no strong men left in comics. They were able to root them all out, and all we have left are a bunch of pussies that are absolutely petrified of getting on the wrong side of this Whisper network. What if one time you talk to a female creator or an editor about, some personal problems? All of a sudden, you're using them as emotional support. What if you actually asked one out on a date? Now you're a sexual harasser. What if you killed a female character in your story? Now you're fridging women. And this Whisper network has an entire database of shit that they can pull on any of these male creators, causing them to constantly be walking on eggshells. There are no big female creators in comics right now. I don't know if you've noticed this. There aren't really any female comic book creators generating money for Marvel, DC, or any company, outside of maybe Kelly Thompson with Absolute Wonder Woman, but I think that has more to do with Scott Snyder and being absolute than Kelly Thompson herself, although that is a good book. Yet, these women are allowed to dominate and control the industry from behind the scenes. Do you remember when Scott Snyder was on vacation with his lovely wife and kids and got called out and made to apologize because he wasn't in the know while everyone was spreading around that "we will not rape women" fucking sign or whatever ridiculous thing was going around comic books during the Me Too movement? There are probably 2 or 3 creators in the entire comic book industry as big as Scott Snyder. What is it, like Robert Kirkman, Scott Snyder, and maybe a Greg Capullo? And he bowed down to him. That's how much power they wield behind the scenes, because they weaponized the one thing the comic book industry is absolutely addicted to: optics. What if I told them no on a project because they weren't the right creator? Oh my goodness, that would make me, in their eyes, a misogynist, and that would ruin my reputation. And these guys are so fucking scared of their own shadow at this point, they've allowed a group of 400 screeching hens behind the scenes that make no positive impact on comic books today to control things. Because they've literally written everything down, they have all the leverage, and with that leverage, they are able to keep these men in line. And because these very men are the ones that let it happen, now we're just supposed to pretend it was always this way. The industry didn't get more inclusive, it got captured. There's only one way you can think in comic books these days, and it's all controlled by a group of people that couldn't sell a fucking comic book if their life depended on it. At least YouTube is out there admitting, hey, yeah, we went out there and censored people, we destroyed lives, we destroyed channels, all for political ideology. But comic books will never do that. We're just supposed to sit here and nod along and be like, oh yeah, that's the way it's supposed to be. It's not the way it's supposed to be. Chuck Dixon should be writing at DC Comics right now. Mike Baron should be doing the fucking Red Hood book, not Gretchen Felker Martin. There are so many talented conservative creators that can't even get a foot in the door anymore, despite generating millions, and in the case of Chuck Dixon, perhaps tens and hundreds of millions of dollars with their fucking ideas over the years. It's absolutely disgusting what has happened to comic books over the years. We're talking about it now because YouTube came clean, and it's time for the comic book industry to start coming clean as well. If you would like more information on the Whisper Network, I actually had a conversation about 4 or 5 years ago with our good friend Perch called The Whisper Network is Watching You. I think you should definitely check that one out. It spells it all out right there. I do appreciate the time. And remember to keep thinking critical.